Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway.
And we're back with another Charting Toward Intimacy NFP in real life episode. Switch her up here because this is Kathleen interviewing Ellen today for what is the 100th episode of Charting Toward Intimacy. So,
it was weird not to intro the episode.
I know. How'd I do?
I think you did great.
Thanks. Okay.
So Kathleen's our host today.
I am hosting, which is, interesting place for me too. But we thought it would be kind of fun for the 100th episode to kind of switch it up and do it a little different. And I'm going to interview Ellen and ask Ellen a bunch of questions about the podcast and the journey of it so far. And we'll kind of find out all those things we've all been dying to know.
Because I know everyone stays up late at night wondering,
exactly.
Why did Ellen start this podcast?
Exactly right. And you know what? Since you just went there and said that, let's kick off with that exact question, Ellen. I am very curious. What did make you want to start this podcast?
Because you were waiting up last night.
I was waiting up last night. I'm like, I can't wait to ask this question because I just am dying to know. But in all seriousness, we know this was like 2020, right?
Yeah.
You kicked this off. And what was the burning desire inside that made you want to start this?
So, a couple of things. Like months prior to this, I mean, almost maybe a year prior to this, I had really gotten into podcasts. And I started listening to a bunch of different Catholic podcasts, some secular podcasts. I was just like, I really fell in love with podcasts. And I was like, man, I wish I had a topic to do a podcast about. And again, this was a year prior. Also I had a baby, and then it was just whatever. Maybe that'll come back around.
That's not happening. Yeah.
That's not happening. But even going back quite a few years prior. So this would have been roughly January of 2018. Mm-hmm. I had been married for about 6 months, and if you're a longtime listener to the podcast, you know bits and pieces of this story. But my husband and I did not start using natural family planning when we got married. I took the birth control pill, and I took it for about 2 full months. I took it for about a month before we got married. And then I took it another month into our marriage. And, by the grace of God, I didn't take it any longer than that. Because when we first got married, we didn't really have a honeymoon effect period of time like people talk about. Mm-hmm. We fell fast after we kind of got home literally from the honeymoon, and we were having issues immediately.
Wow.
And those just continued to exacerbate over the course of the first couple of weeks of our marriage. And luckily, again, by the grace of God, we kind of realized that one major issue might be the fact that we are, in mortal sin. Surprise, surprise.
No big deal. Yeah.
That was affecting our marriage.
Oh my God.
I can laugh about it now because I'm many years past that. But at the time,
not funny in the moment.
Not funny in the moment and not clear in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever been in mortal sin, I feel so much for people who are in mortal sin because it's almost impossible to see your way out of it. It is only the hand of God that reaches you in the depths of your personal hell and brings you out.
Wow.
I love, there's a sacred image of Jesus pulling Adam and Eve out of hell.
Wow.
And when I first saw that image, I know I'll try to find it and link it in the show notes because I just love this image. But I that image really spoke to me when I saw it. And again, I saw this like years later. I didn't see it at the time. But I was just like, man, that was Jesus to my husband and I at that moment. Yeah. He reached down and pulled us out. And so I stopped taking the birth control pill, but literally had no idea like what next.
Right. Yeah.
And we pretty much just abstained for like a couple of months. Wow. Which at the same time, I also had serious issues with sex in general. I had some past sexual trauma that at the time, again, didn't even realize was an issue. That's only been in the last, couple of months that I've discovered the sexual trauma. And so I had past sexual trauma that had really just attacked my beliefs and understanding of sex and sexual intimacy and married intimacy. Yeah. And yeah, so the abstinence was honestly the best thing for us because I had a lot of things I needed to work through.
Wow. Yeah.
Eventually I found a PDF online teaching essentially the symptothermal method. It's not exactly an accurate. I look back on that PDF now as an instructor in a symptothermal method, and I'm like, this is not great.
We call that poor man's symptothermal.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, I read it. Didn't necessarily understand it, didn't necessarily trust it, didn't trust myself to read any of these biomarkers truly. Definitely wasn't doing it right. I can guarantee you that. That's
why we always say, find yourself an instructor.
Yep. That's why I am so passionate about that.
Caveat.
Just a little caveat. And I mean, we did avoid pregnancy mainly because we abstained a lot still. Yeah. Like what? And again, part of this was because we didn't trust the method that I had like learned from this PDF online, which I mean, that was probably a good idea. Yeah. To not trust a method like that.
Very true.
But then the other part of it was truly this, I had this need for sexual healing. I also had vaginismus, all wrapped into this past sexual trauma and these issues that I had and these understandings of sex going into marriage. And my husband had his own issues, and I'm not going to talk about his on the podcast because, you know, if he wants to come on and talk about them, he can. But, you know, it wasn't necessarily all me. It was a partnership in that we're both fallen, very fallen. Yeah. So anyway, So January of 2018, we're married for about 6 months. I'm kind of in the beginning stages of like learning this symptothermal method. And I was lying in bed one night, couldn't go to sleep. And I just like opened my heart to God, probably for the first time in my life, like really opened my heart. And I was just like, this is really hard. This is really, really hard. I don't understand why it is so hard. I don't like that it's so hard. You tell me when, Lord. And I don't want anyone else to be in the position that I'm in right now. I don't want anyone else to feel like this. And so you tell me when, you tell me what, and I will do it for you. I want to make this easier for other people. And, you know, I didn't get an immediate response.
That's how it always goes with me.
That's how it always goes.
Lord, don't you like open the clouds and talk to people? Yeah. I don't understand.
Right.
Why aren't you doing that to me?
Lord, I just poured my heart out to you and you didn't tell me immediately what I should do.
My husband pointed out that that's a very Old Testament trick that God uses.
Right.
Ever since he sent the Holy Spirit, like he does that a lot less. It's like, darn it. But it would be so convenient.
And the thing is, in the waiting is healing. And in the waiting is continuing to open up our hearts. He draws back. I mean, if you think about the Song of Songs, there's this kind of weird interplay between the wife is like, oh, my bridegroom is here. And then suddenly she like can't find him. And so she's like searching for him and she's longing for him. The Lord does that to increase our longing. He does take a step back and say, hey, come closer to me, long for me more, right? So in that waiting, so again, this is January of 2018, and I did not get an immediate response. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until about a year later after that, my husband and I were invited to join this like NFP task force sort of that I stole that word from you because you're on an NFP task force.
We're on an NFP task force.
There wasn't really a name to this group, but it was just kind of like people from our parish, and one of the deacons was like interested in kind of just like getting NFP a little bit more out there. Yeah. And so my husband and I like went to this first meeting, and I kid you not. So I had been essentially like practicing this quote unquote like method of NFP for like a year essentially. And had, we had avoided.
Right. Yeah. Successful
avoidance. But we were, or actually, I guess at the time we were pregnant, but anyway,
yeah.
we did in fact know what we were doing, to an extent. So this group is like, hey, we got to get NFP out there more. And I was asked in this group, what method do you use? And I was like, I don't know. I literally had no idea that there were multiple methods.
Need to point out quick while you're telling this story that like you got married in what, 2017?
Mm-hmm.
And it's 2022. Within 5 years, you've gone through all of this in 5 years.
Yeah. In all honesty,
that's a lot of stuff to go through and a big like jump you've made within 5 years time.
Yeah. And like in the scheme of things, 5 years is so short.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
like,
that's not a lot of time.
I know. I'm talking about how God didn't answer my call immediately, but like truly it is slow.
Yes, exactly.
It feels, I mean, it is fast. I mean, it feels slow in the moment, but like truly, the difference of 5 years, it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean, when my husband and I, when we celebrated our 5-year anniversary earlier this year, we were reflecting just on how different of people we were when we got married, and like how much good change we've been through.
Yeah.
And just how much stronger our marriage is. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's awesome. God is good.
So anyway, I joined this task force, and we, threw around ideas, and I got connected, at the diocese, and I got connected with our marriage and family life coordinator at the diocese, and then was talking with our pastor, and we decided that we wanted to become instructors. And so a little later that year, again, this is like later into, or, oh gosh, see, numbers are like really off right now. It was 2019. See, so all of this, it's like, it wasn't just like immediately happened.
Right.
So later in 2019, we started the process for certification as SymptoPro instructors together. So a lot of you guys might not know this, but my husband is also a certified SymptoPro instructor with me. He doesn't really teach, but it was an absolute grace that we got certified together. Having my husband know as much about my cycle as I do was a necessary component for our healing. Just our couple healing. And I'm not going to get into like details of our specific brokenness. But that was just such an amazing grace. And it's great too, because I mainly teach by myself now. Kurt hasn't actually jumped on a call to teach in like 2 years. Mm-hmm. But I can go to him with a client chart or a question and say, what would you suggest? And he's often got really great suggestions for me.
That's really cool.
So,
that's awesome.
Very, very helpful. Not that everyone listening can like hack that, but I recommend it if it's possible.
My husband would, if I said become certified, actually, when I was looking to become certified, I was looking into couple to couple league because we, that's where we had learned sympto.
And they require couples to become certified
couples.
together. And
my
teach
husband
together.
was like, listen, I support you in everything you're doing, but I won't do that. It's like, no, I have no interest.
Yeah.
We all have our gifts.
We all have our gifts. Yeah. And Sympto Pro doesn't require it. But Sympto Pro has an option. So they have a single certification option and they have a couple certification option. So essentially we are certified together, to teach, but I can teach by myself.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
So anyway, so we became instructors. And now we're kind of moving through 2019. 2020 was when we finished our instruction. We became, we were in practicum at this phase, which means that we're instructors. We fully had all of the knowledge and we could teach classes and things like that. But we still needed oversight to just confirm that we were telling people the right things and, that kind of thing.
Teaching.
So practice teaching, all that kind of stuff. So, we were all set to do our first group class in March of 2020. And I don't know if that rings any bells for anybody.
March 2020, that was a big month.
This is a big month. This is a big month. So we didn't start teaching immediately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, what the heck, Lord? Like, I thought this was your thing that you were calling me to do. And I was going to make NFP really accessible to people. And I was going to, like, all of the couples coming through our marriage prep, we're going to be able to learn NFP at no charge because we were going to be doing this on a volunteer basis and like all of this. Like, what is going on, Lord? And so then I get reconnected. This is random. Okay, so this story just popped into my head. I remember now how we got reconnected. So at the beginning, like a month or two into the pandemic, there was like kind of the first of those online conferences. It was like, I think it was called like the Catholic Online Conference or something like that. Yes. It was like the first one of these. We've seen a million of them now, but it was like free for the weekend, or you could get the premium pass. I don't know, maybe this was like the second one. Cause if you got the premium pass, then you got access to, like these live Q&A sessions throughout the weekend. So I actually think this might not have been the first one. So these live Q&A sessions, so I ended up deciding to get the premium version, and I join in on the first live Q&A session. And who else is on this Zoom call except the diocesan director from my diocese, who I had gotten connected with like 2 years prior, who I had lost touch with.
Yeah.
And she messages me on Zoom, "Hey, are you Ellen Holloway from Fremont? Like, is this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am. You're Mimi from the Diocese of Oakland."
That is so funny.
And so we get reconnected and we start emailing, and she was looking for something that the diocese could bankroll to kind of promote NFP within the diocese. And I suggested the podcast because this, again, had been this little inkling in the back of my head for a couple of years.
Yeah,
and she loved the idea.
That's amazing.
And so we jumped in, and
that's so cool.
And that is the story.
That is the story
of the podcast.
Got, like, little like incidents, like several incidents throughout like a couple years.
Yeah.
And like all pulled together in like 1 minute. It's like so cool.
Yeah.
I love how God works sometimes.
Oh gosh, it's crazy. It is so crazy.
Now tell us. So, okay. I love that story. How did you come up with the title of the podcast? How did you name it?
All right.
What
So
are other options?
We went through a lot of names for the podcast. So in starting the podcast, we didn't want this to just be like this whim thing. And so I pulled together a focus group. I had a deacon, a married deacon. I had a priest. I had a couple of married women with children, varied ages, and I had some young adults. Cool. So I tried to kind of get like a cross section, not necessarily that all of those people would be my target audience.
Right.
But I wanted kind of this cross section of people and getting thoughts and ideas. And I first kind of put together a survey with a couple of podcast episode ideas. And I actually found the survey because you sent me these questions, Kathleen, and I was like, somewhere is this survey. It was a Google form, so it was easy to find.
Yeah.
All right, so here are a couple of options, and I realized one of them isn't on here because I think we had cut it out early. But okay.
Oh.
So here's a couple of options. Theology of NFP, bringing God into the bedroom one couple at a time.
Ooh.
That was the one I really wanted to go with, actually.
That
Theology of
cool,
NFP.
yeah.
That was because it was kind of like a play on theology of the body, and I knew we were going to like bring that in a lot. So I wanted it to be theology of NFP. And actually, fun fact, I registered the Instagram handle Theology of NFP.
Really?
Because I was truly set on that one.
That is so funny.
The next one here, what Catholics don't know about NFP, spreading the beauty of NFP teachings. I thought that was that was actually a pretty popular one with the focus group. Catholics Between the Sheets, a theology of NFP podcast. I know. Unfortunately,
I like that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, the focus group did not like that one. They thought it was a little too risque.
I love that.
But I think Catholics Between the Sheets is hilarious. Like,
it is.
I think that'd be a great name for a book.
Your memoirs.
My memoirs.
Your memoirs. We're reserving it.
Catholics Between the Sheets.
Go by the website now. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. That could be my blog. I'll start a blog.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. There you go. In all your spare time.
This next one, this surprisingly was actually the number one from the focus group, but we still didn't use it. The NFP podcast. Simple.
It's simple. It's to the point.
It's very to the point.
Covers everything. You know,
covers everything.
NFP podcast.
The last one on this list: natural family planning and Catholics. It's not your grandma's rhythm method. Pretty good. You know, again, still pretty to the point. So anyway, we brought those to the focus group, and then we still decided we didn't like any of them.
That's so funny. So this one wasn't even on there.
Yeah. There was another one early in the brainstorming, Talk Holy to Me. That was an option. But we kind of realized like,
that's hilarious.
Maybe that one's not quite right. It's also kind of used in other like Christian things.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it doesn't really like encapsulate the NFP topic. You know what I mean? Necessarily.
Right. So actually, the title, Charting Toward Intimacy, came from Mimi at the diocese. It was totally her idea. It just popped into her head one day. She sent it to me via email, and I was like, yeah, that's it. Like,
there you go.
That's the title.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. So it was good.
That's awesome. I love that.
But yeah, we had quite a few brainstorming sessions, including and not including alcohol. I was hoping that would help us come up with something funny. But yeah,
I mean, it usually does.
It usually does. I think that's where Catholics Between the Sheets came from.
Listen, I think we should change the title. I don't know. I think we should change it in the 5-year plan here going forward.
Yeah.
We're changing the name of the podcast. That's happening.
Oh my gosh. I really do. I love that title.
It's fantastic. It needs to be used for something.
It really does. I think we could do a blog.
Yeah. Or maybe even like a series, like maybe a series within the podcast, a Catholics Between. I don't know how that would work.
Sounds fun.
It just needs to be used for something. So let's brainstorm.
If you're listening, let us know.
Let us know what we should.
What should we do with that title?
What should we do with that title? Because it clearly needs to be used. Okay. I have another question for you.
All right.
What has been the biggest challenge that you've run into with this podcast?
Well, initially, using Audacity was my biggest challenge.
Oh my gosh.
So for those of you who might not know, Audacity is a free open source audio editing tool. Basically like 90% of podcasters who start out use Audacity because it is a highly effective tool. It's free and it has the capabilities that you need. As a podcast starting out. Now, of course, there are, popular paid versions. Adobe, of course, has their version that I can't think of the name of right now. But pretty much everybody starts off with Audacity because you have zero money when you're starting a podcast.
That's fair. Yeah.
Man alive, I could not figure it out.
You're like, maybe this wasn't meant to be. I can't figure out this free software.
It was like really hard for me to use.
That's so funny.
It was really fun. I mean, now I would say I'm a pro at Audacity.
Look at that.
But yeah, no, that was like my biggest challenge moving forward. But now, like, kind of moving to today, I would say my biggest challenge is like social media. Because I don't have a personal Instagram account. I have a Facebook, but I'm like Generation Z. I only use it for Marketplace.
Marketplace. I know. That's what I'm also getting off of social media. I mean, I did delete. I closed up my Facebook for Lent, and then I kept myself off of it until I needed it to like advertise something.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know, and it just takes up so much time that I'm like also like sort of decreasing how much I'm on social media, or like really trying to. So I hear you there, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, well, and I think it's important for the podcast to have social media channels to, be found elsewhere. And I've limited it to Instagram because I can't even fathom handling anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But honestly, like it's for some reason, it is a lot of work. It's a big sticking point for me to do social media and like create a post and actually post things. And so I'm like, I don't do it very often. Like it's very hit or miss with social media. I do respond to DMs as quickly as I can. Like if that aspect of it, not hard at all. Right. I'm happy to talk to you guys on DMs.
I mean, literally, like they hire people to handle their social media.
Yeah.
Right?
You know what? Like, when I start making like hundreds or even tens, when I start making tens from this podcast,
tens of dollars. Yeah, I mean, but just to say like that, it takes so much time.
It does.
And when you have young kids, it's like, if you're taking the time on social media, then you're kind of like ignoring your kids a lot of the time. That's what I found, because I agree with you. It's like all the things you can do, like to make a story, and it's like, how the heck do I do this? It's like,
I know,
like an old lady trying to figure out, right?
There's not like a how-to guide when Instagram creates a new like feature. They just create it and you have to figure it out. Like,
I know. And like reels, I've made one reel in my life and it was the simplest, shortest thing. And it took me way too long.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I am just like letting the television raise my children while I figure out this stupid reel. Like, am I really doing the best I can today?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I don't know.
So social media for me is tough with the podcast. I wish I could be more active there. But at the same time, like I recognize that it's really important for me to put that time toward my family and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see moving forward. Maybe at some point, Chatting Toward Intimacy will have a social media manager.
How about that? Anyone interested? No.
I don't have any money to pay you.
You'll get paid literal pennies.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, moving right along, I'm curious if you have a favorite episode out of, again, we are on episode 100. So round of applause for Ellen, because that is that is a milestone. That's a feat. That's a big deal.
I know. It's like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Before we started recording this, or like last night, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, we are recording episode 100. That's so cool. Like this podcast, we've been doing it for about 2 years, a little over 2 years, because when I started the podcast, I was only doing it every other week.
Yeah.
So a little over 2 years. It's really kind of fun.
Awesome.
So I have
out of the 100 episodes that you have.
Yeah, I couldn't pick one.
Naturally. I mean, of course.
Yeah. I have a couple. I wrote them down. So the 2-part series with Dr. Sarah Bartel, with licit and illicit acts, that is absolute, like that one's so amazing. I love that one, and so many people like those are the top listened episodes as well, by leaps and bounds. So I love those ones. There's an episode called Confessing Sexual Sin with my friend Father Matthew Murray. That one is so good. Everyone needs to hear that episode. Oh gosh, it's amazing. There's an NFP in Real Life episode that we did, Kathleen, at the beginning of this year, 2022, called Chastity. I really liked that one.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah, we brought in like the catechism, and our minds were blown about what the catechism has to say about chastity. That was great. And then there's another one, our views on sex and intimacy coming into marriage. That one was really good and really poignant, kind of getting to something that we don't talk about a lot, and I think really should be discussed in marriage prep is like, what are your views on sex and intimacy, and how are they different from each other?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
those are all really good episodes.
Those are, exactly. I couldn't choose.
Yeah, they were.
I couldn't choose one.
They were all really good. Congratulations, you passed the test. You chose the best episode.
Woo!
I'm also curious, what is probably the biggest thing that you've learned in doing this? Or I guess maybe what surprised you? But how have you, what have you learned? The biggest thing you've learned through doing this?
I think the biggest thing is not like one thing, but when I started the podcast, I was like, I'm starting this podcast. Get ready to laugh, everybody.
Oh boy.
I'm starting this podcast because I've healed. I've arrived.
That's fantastic. You're so cute.
I know. Past Ellen is so adorable.
She's so sweet and naive and lovely.
Truly, truly, that was my thought. And I just I just imagine Jesus was just sitting next to me like, it's
honey,
okay,
child.
honey. Oh, honey. Oh, sweetheart, you have so much left to go. But I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to be here with you the whole time.
Yeah.
When I started the podcast, I was just like, you know what? I'm past this. This is, I'm gonna heal everybody else, right? You hear this in what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm gonna do all this great stuff.
Yep.
And I have had so much more healing around concepts of natural family planning and using it in my marriage, sex, chastity, intimacy, just gosh, everything around sex. I have had so much healing over the course of doing this podcast. And so I want to put that out to anybody that is like feeling like, oh, I can't talk to people about this because I still have issues with it. Or I couldn't help out with marriage prep because I don't even know if I like NFP,
Yeah.
I think sometimes in the teaching, in the sharing, in the, just openness to follow God's plan, that's where the greater healing happens.
Yeah. And I think even like in the preparing, like I would say for me, right? Like when I'm prepping for an NFP talk for pre-Cana or whatever it is. In doing so, you're sort of forced to reflect on how you feel about it and what you think about it and what you want to share about it, what you want people to know about it. And it sort of changes you or sometimes it can change you, other times and change your viewpoint. Other times it really just kind of solidifies things in your head, which is like, wow, how have I not like realized this,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's such great merit to trying to synthesize something and like share it with someone else. Because you really have to like wrap your head around it yourself before you can like say a short sentence about something. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of what I've gotten out of this podcast is just this continued healing, this continued learning. I mean, honestly, like I even just a little bit before we recorded this podcast, I put a post on Instagram where I was kind of talking about that, like, I used to use the word intimacy as like just an exchange for sex.
Yeah.
And that was partially because I couldn't say the word sex without blushing, or various other feelings of disdain. And, but I mean, I've learned so much more about what true intimacy is, and that intimacy can happen with or without sex.
Right. Yeah.
And sex can happen with or without intimacy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
But I mean, just so many things. So, that has just, I think that probably, I wouldn't say that has surprised me necessarily, but it would surprise me if I told, 2020 Ellen, who was starting the podcast, like, by the way, you're gonna journey so much more than you already have, right? Like, God needed me to journey to a certain point before I could even start this podcast.
Yeah.
And then he was like, okay, now that you've started the podcast, now that you're regularly thinking about these things and talking about them, now we're going to do some hard work. And it's been hard work. It has not just been this like easy, go with the flow process. It's been a lot of hard work. But if it wasn't for the podcast, I probably would not be doing I wouldn't be in the master's program that I'm in right now, and pursuing a master's of arts in theology of the body and the new evangelization. I mean, I'm so grateful for that. And my heart just burns when I take these classes, because it's just, I'm learning and healing so much more.
Yes. Well, and let's not forget the biggest fruit of the podcast is
our friendship.
Obviously.
Obviously. Actually, yeah. You know what? That probably would have surprised me too. If it had been like, hey, you're actually going to meet someone who's going to become like one of your closest friends.
Yeah, right.
And
you're going to talk about the most
intimate
stuff.
Things. I mean, you guys, we would not share our Marco Polo conversations with anyone else.
No,
like,
we would not.
We wouldn't even share them with our husbands. Like, we talk about, I mean, every once in a while we will.
Yeah, that's true.
when
once in a while, Michael jumps on to the Marco Polo.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's so true.
But I mean, you guys, I talk on the podcast a lot about finding someone that you can talk about NFP with. Like, Kathleen is my person.
No, like legit though, legit. It's the craziest things, and even like the silliest things that sometimes like you make connections with, and you have these like aha moments, right? And
oh my gosh, yes.
It's just like, I can't like talk about this to anybody except Ellen.
No, literally no one is going to understand what I'm saying.
I have other friends that do NFP and like, there are some things, right, that I can like talk to them about, but like, there's a lot of, most of them are not as interested in like the depth and I don't know, almost like the comparison and the connection to like real intense theology, that NFP can kind of pull out. They're just kind of like trying to make it through the day of like practicing NFP. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and they're sort of in that like love-hate relationship with it, which like, I mean, Let's be honest, we all are. But they're not so interested in like philosophizing about it like you and I do.
Yeah, we do. We philosophize about NFP a lot.
Yeah, we do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those are some things that that we'll start sharing on the podcast is some of our philosophical discoveries about NFP.
Yeah. Well, let's go into that question next. How would you like to see this podcast grow you've been on this journey, the podcast for 2 years, but this whole journey for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
From like birth control to like hardcore promoting NFP. In the next 5 years, how would you like to see the podcast grow or change?
It's funny because when you shared this question with me before we started recording, and this is so funny. My initial thought was like, 5 years? I haven't even been doing this podcast for 5 years. Right, why would I have a 5-year plan?
Or 2, but I'm just it's either 5 or 10 years. We don't plan things in 2-year increments, obviously.
But I don't know like what will happen in 5 years, right? I'm going to continue doing this podcast as long as God calls me to do this podcast. If that's only a year longer, then like that's what it is. That doesn't feel like what
mm-hmm.
what it's gonna be. I anticipate this podcast kind of being a part of my life for a long time. Which is wonderful because I love it.
Yeah.
I love the kind of conversations.
If you're not doing it for another 5 years, we're all going to be disappointed. So
yeah, exactly. Right. If 5 years from now, I'm not doing the podcast, and I've stopped forever, right? Not just like on a break or something. I think I would be disappointed too.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, like when the Lord shuts doors, he opens others. So if that's the case, then there'll be other things going on too. But
very true.
So this is something like I'm really excited to share this with you, and I'm glad that you're still listening right now because this is like one of our longest episodes thus far. This is gonna be a long one. But it's episode 100. We're going for it.
It's special.
It's a special episode.
Exactly.
Is the future of the podcast. So after this episode 100, we're going to take a little break. Don't worry, we'll be back. It's just that Christmas is coming up, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I like to take a little break just to kind of revive things and get set up for kind of the next year coming. But the podcast is going to be pivoting a little bit. So the tagline for this podcast for the past 2.5 years, I guess it's almost been 2.5 years because it started in July of 2020, and now this episode is coming out in December. So 2.5 years has been expanding the natural family planning conversation from a Catholic perspective. So I had this realization a number of months ago that it was time for me to do a zoom out pivot. If you're familiar with like startup terms, you might be familiar with the term of zoom out pivot. I literally was like, I was listening to this audiobook about like startups, and I was told what this concept was, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
So for 2.5 years, this podcast has been very niche in NFP and things having to do with NFP. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do is zoom out to Catholic sexual ethics, which means that NFP is absolutely still involved in that. And there still will be episodes talking about NFP, that none of that aspect is going away. It's just that we're going to broaden our reach a little bit more. So we're going to do a lot more episodes like those favorite episodes that I pulled out. So that chastity episode that we did where we pulled out the catechism and really like opened it up and just, I don't know, both Kathleen and I's minds were blown that morning as we
Yeah.
were reading things and diving into them and discussing them. We're going to be doing more stuff like that. We're going to be bringing in the theology of the body in a lot deeper ways, partially because we all need more knowledge of theology of the body because it's incredible,
Yeah.
but also because I am knee deep in this master's program and I am getting so much knowledge that I can't wait to share with everybody.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm excited for
Just
that.
incredible
Yeah.
stuff. And so we're going to be journeying together on that kind of stuff, which I'm so excited about. And we're going to be, having more conversations just about real life, sexual ethics. So like that conversation that I had with my friend, Father Matthew Murray, on confessing sexual sin, we're going to be trying to bring on some more priests and have some more conversations about sexual ethics, from their side, from their perspective, what they're seeing, and things like that. So I'm so excited for this next like season of the podcast. And I can't wait for it. I was telling Kathleen on a Marco Polo like a couple days ago. I was just like, do we have to take a break? Like, can we just
and I
hit
was
the ground
like,
running?
Ellen, we're coming up on Christmas and I've got 5 children. We need to
You're
take
like,
a break.
no. We
a
can't
break is
keep
happening,
recording. Yeah.
Okay. I don't care whose podcast this is. It's happening.
So funny.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, so we're still taking a break.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're gonna be doing this zoom out pivot to some more things along those lines. The other thing that is going to happen is you're gonna be hearing Kathleen's voice a lot more.
Yay! And
So
I'm all so excited for that.
I know. Well, I'm excited for it. So in the past, the podcast has really been like, I have been the host and I've had a myriad of guests on the podcast. And then Kathleen came on about a year ago as sort of like every other episode was with Kathleen. And we are really more pivoting to most episodes will be with Kathleen and Ellen as co-hosts. And then there'll be the occasional episode where either it'll be Kathleen and I with a guest or it'll just be me with a guest, depending on what goes on. And I don't know, maybe we'll even get crazy and it'll just be Kathleen with a guest.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. How are my hosting skills right now? Because I feel like
I think you're doing great.
As you are.
I think you're doing great.
That was news to me.
I know that was... We haven't actually talked about that. Who knows? Maybe we won't get that crazy. We'll see.
Oh gosh.
So you're going to be hearing Kathleen's voice a lot more, which I am so excited about as well.
Me too.
But yeah, so the podcast is going places.
It's changing.
We
it's
are
molding.
Yeah.
It's,
we are just following the Lord's lead right now.
That's right.
And it feels very right to pivot in this direction. Yeah. And I have shared this with a handful of listeners, a handful of friends that I have that listen to the podcast. I've shared this and it's been overwhelmingly like, yes, I want more of that, because here's the thing. These are the things you don't want to Google.
Yeah. No, please don't.
Please don't Google them.
Don't Google them.
Right.
Don't.
Catholic sexual ethics is a topic that is kind of difficult to approach, because while the church has incredibly great, documentation of everything that it teaches, sometimes it can feel kind of overwhelming. Like Love and Responsibility by Wojtyła is fantastic. It is also a deeply philosophical book.
Yeah.
That uses some like tough words. Also, the translation is not great. So the grammar is like, well, I mean, the translation's fine, but the grammar of the translation did not it didn't really get grammatically checked. So sometimes it's like kind of hard to read because you're like, there should be a comma somewhere in here. And I don't even know where.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it.
Oh man. So, so we're going to be trying to, synthesize those things for you and make some of these topics easier, but then also opening up just the beauty of how, what our bodies have to say about salvation and the incarnation and, all of these kinds of things, and like what the fertility cycle has to do with that, what NFP has to do with that, what periodic continence has to do with, God's salvation for us.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out here, guys. Like, I was talking about how the Lord like took a step away from me and I had to come to him, right?
Yeah.
How much more like do we feel it personally when we have to like take a step away from our spouse and like long for them while we're abstaining?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's for another podcast episode.
That's for another.
But there's like a little teaser of like the kind of things that we're going to be like talking about and breaking open and things like that. So I can't wait. I'm so excited. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be an awesome journey, you guys.
I'm so excited too. Yeah, the Lord is moving. He's doing good things.
He is.
It's gonna be pretty. So everyone, get excited.
Excited.
With that, one of our longest episodes yet, I think, is a good time to wrap things up. But I'm going to let you close it out with your normal stuff because I can't remember what you typically say.
I'll take back over the hosting. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you're not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy, even though you know that I'm not that great at Instagram. But please do reach out to us. Yeah, I've been outed. I outed myself. Please do reach out to us. We love to hear from you guys. So via Instagram or via email, links to those are in the show notes. Until next time.
See you guys.